welcome to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. Well, this week we're going to be focusing on the economic message that the government is sending out vis-a-vis reforms. We've had, of course, the farmers' bills. We've seen the uproar it has caused also, but the government remains adamant, at least. It's coming halfway, but it feels that the reforms are a good cause and it's not going to really back down all the way. We've also seen the hike in petrol prices. We've also heard the economic story, especially post-COVID. In fact, we're going into a minus in terms of recession. So where is it all leading us? How steadfast is the Modi government on reforms? And is our economy in safe hands? That's something I'm going to be discussing on the roundtable today. Joining me is Dheeraj Nair. He was formerly with the Niti Aayog, and now, of course, he's the Chief Economic Advisor at Vedanta. I have M.K. Venu, Managing Editor, Founding Editor at the Wire.in. Dilip Cherian, Image Guru, and also an economic and political commentator. Aditi Fadnis, Political Editor at the Business Standard. Dheeraj, where are we at now? Are the signals that are coming out of the government, especially regarding the economic front, are very worrying. They are winning elections, they're managing the political part, but the economic part is something that, we are not very confident about.
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is that we are in an extraordinary situation, right, because of the COVID pandemic. And frankly, I think the recovery is a little better than even I thought and a lot of people thought, in the sense that, in the first quarter, we were minus 23.9. But once the lockdown was lifted and economic activity started, in the second quarter, it's now minus 7.5. And RBI is forecasting the next third and fourth quarter to be marginally positive, 0.1 and I think 0.4. So I think in that sense, we are out of the worst of the pandemic-induced crisis and going ahead positively. But my view has always been that there was a slowdown even before COVID came along. And therefore, that needs to be addressed even once we are post the worst of the COVID phase. And in that sense, I think the reforms that they are doing or they intend to do are very critical, because I think it's in that context I would like to see the farm reforms or the reforms that are in the coal sector, the reforms in the labor codes. I think the government realizes that there's a need for more structural reform to boost growth fundamentally, regardless of COVID. So, COVID is one factor, but beyond that, I think the dividends from the earlier reforms of the Rao years or the Vajpayee years have clearly run out. And to boost investment and to boost growth, you need a new stretch of reforms. And I think that is what is being attempted. And on that front, I see reason for optimism. Naturally, none of these structural reforms delivers you growth in 1 or 2 months or 1 or 2 quarters. It will take some time. But I think in terms of being bold on reform, the government is doing the right thing, and it will change that fundamental slowdown which was happening even before. That's my view.
Venu, your take on this thing, what the government is doing, and when can we expect our petrol prices to come down? This is something that the government is doing to rake in revenue more than the needs of the market.
Yeah, Priya, to begin with, I agree with Dheeraj that Indian economy was slowing down quite drastically even before COVID, right? The quarter before COVID had, I think, 3% or 3.1% growth. And we have seen a consistent decline in GDP growth over the last 3 years in India. And even when the world, 75% of the world economies had better GDP growth in 2017-18, India's was still in declining mode for various reasons, which we need not go into now. Which Amitabh Kant described as the backlash of two big structural reforms, according to him, demonetization and GST. So this is Amitabh Kant has publicly admitted that structural reforms they disrupt economy for a while. So that and various other reasons for economy was in decline. Now from here on, Priya, what is the government doing? Now my view, Priya, is that this kind of structural reforms that they're doing, the farm bills particularly, and the labor law reforms. Now the government is arguing, these structural reforms to begin with, they are, the businesses and the foreign investors, foreign credit rating agencies, they all like these structural reforms, right? They think that it is good for the for long-term growth prospects of the economy. Now, my view is the government's argument that this crisis, post-COVID crisis, should be used as opportunity, and like we did in 1991. They're using the 1991 analogy, right, to push through all these reforms is somewhat misplaced. Priya, I'll tell you why. In 1991, we had an external sector crisis. There was a balance of payments crisis, but the domestic economy hadn't been so badly hammered like during COVID. We hadn't had like incomes going down, unemployment at like multi-decades low. Consumption was still ticking in 1991. Domestic consumption, domestic investment was okay. At the moment, what we are seeing is the opposite, Priya. Our external sector is very robust. We're getting a lot of foreign investment. Stock market is booming. RBI reserves are increasing. But the domestic economy is badly battered in terms of negative growth, in terms of incomes having been smashed, in terms of quality of employment having gone down, in terms of people losing. Surveys show that people are still not back to their salary levels. Some big firms, of course, are restoring salary. So all this, Priya, there is a problem. So when you do structural labor reforms in the midst of such a huge damage to people's incomes and to jobs, you have to politically manage it, the communication, right? I don't know whether the BJP has managed. The various state governments have done labor reforms. Congress governments have done. Similarly, farm reforms at a time when farm incomes have been steadily declining, and the promise of repeated promise of doubling farm income has not materialized. So these farm reforms have created a lot of apprehensions. We can go into that, the pros and cons, right? So I don't know, with these kind of sentiment, when you do structural reform, there has to be a broader sentiment of positivity among economic players. So the political economy, the bottom 70%, 80, 90% of the people, what they think of the reform, one doesn't know. The corporate sector likes it. Global investors like it. Now, in the next 2-3 years, what kind of recovery we'll see? So I'll just end by quoting Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council member Anant Nageswaran, who actually cites IMF data to say that India might grow at about nominal GDP 8.8% over the next few years, and by March 2026, our GDP will be at $4 trillion. Now, 8.8% GDP growth average over the next few years means real GDP growth of about 4.5-5%, assuming inflation is about 4.5, right? So that's not a really great growth, 4.5% over the next 4 years. So we are, by 2026, they're talking about 4 trillion, whereas Mr. Modi's agenda was to reach 5 trillion by 2025, if you remember.
Okay. Let me get Aditi on this also now. Yeah, Venu. Yeah. Aditi, this 1991 moment is what Venu talked about. So is the government, you've also covered 91 pretty closely. Is this the right time to go in for these kind of reforms?
Well, I don't know if there's a wrong time for reform. You need to go about it in a manner that you know where it's going to end. So if you know where it's going to end, then no time is wrong time to do reform.
Dilip, will you take the question in terms of the timing of the reforms?
Sure. I think that broadly what we're talking about is in the direction of hope and a sentiment that certain kinds of people will continue to invest in the economy, while the economy itself may also be battered and bruised. You touched briefly on the point of petrol prices. And I think that is something that needs to be looked at. If government were to not impose these extraordinarily painful taxes on people, I think that you would have a fillip to both consumption as well as economic growth in many, many small and medium sectors. Where it's hurting the economy today is the fact that you are seeing the hollowing out of the bottom 50% at least, or if not more, of the economy, because those were badly afflicted by the two structural reforms that were alluded to by Venu very kindly, and which really have left a large part of the employment generating sector weakened and worse off than it was 3-4 years ago. So that's one thing. The second thing is that if government is indeed getting these revenues to spend on reflating the economy and helping the economy get back on its feet, one would like to see a little bit more of muscle behind the kind of initiatives which have been announced. The stock market enthusiasm about some of them and the sort of resultant expectation that foreigners will begin investing because we are reforming certain sectors is also based on the fact that globally there is a kind of season of not investing in China. And I think that money, which is awash in the world, will have to find a place. And India is probably a place where you will see more sale of public sector assets. You will see more of what Dheeraj mentioned, reform in the coal sector, etc. So that money is waiting to come in. And I see that that will happen. But will that lead to real growth? The 4% which the Niti Aayog, the Prime Minister's economic advisor has forecast is probably the most sensible way of pitching our hopes, at least for the next year. And I don't see that that as being something that we can go against. As far as reforms are concerned, I do agree with both Aditi and Venu that reforms are what need to happen, but the process and the ordering of it, there may be political issues on it, and that's a subject of debate. I'll stop here.
Yeah, if I can just come in here, I think it's very interesting. I think the Indian Express had done a profile of the top 35 leaders of the farmers' protests which are happening in Delhi. And I think 32 of them were Punjabis, very obviously Punjabis, and 2 or 3 of them were left leaders, including a couple from West Bengal. So it clearly showed who is bothered about the farm bill, and the people who are bothered about it are the ones who benefited most from the way the current system operates. This current system also has a history. In the 60s, India didn't have enough food, wheat and rice to feed its people. There was a green revolution, and Punjab, Haryana, and this part of India was then given these incentives, MSP, and the high yielding varieties and so on. But that has gone past its use by date. Now wheat and rice actually rots in FCI go downs, whereas the problems we have, the inflation we have, is in other things like fruits, vegetables, dairy. So I think there needs to be a diversification of the farming sector away from this over dependence on wheat, rice. In fact, in Punjab as well, rice is not a good crop to grow. It consumes a lot of water tables are down, pesticide use is high. There are a lot of problems with the system, but to a certain extent, some large Punjab farmers have benefited from it, and they're therefore worried that the system will change. What will happen to them? I don't think anything negative will happen to them, but that is their worry. But the rest of the country, rest of the farmers are not worried, because frankly, they were not doing particularly great out of the current system, and they probably think that this system is worth giving a try, the new system, and it may in fact bring down the prices of fruits, vegetables, and certain other commodities. The second thing I want to say is that the government is in a lose-lose position no matter what they do. So if you say the growth was slowing down before COVID, which is what I said and Venu also said, and then you say this is the timing of this reform may or may not be right, it's not a 1991 moment, but then you can't have it both ways. If you're saying there is a problem, then you need structural reforms to address that problem. Of course, we can debate which exactly are the structural reforms needed, but I think there can be no second opinion that if we don't do it now, frankly, there is no time we'll do it. Similarly, on your question on petrol and taxes, I'm not a great one to keep increasing taxes on anything, whether it's income tax or corporate tax or tax on petrol. But again, there's so much demand from large sections of society for various goods and services from the government that ultimately the government has to again find a way to finance them. So easy way in one way is to tax petrol and diesel, which is basically consumed by middle class or upper middle class people. So I think again these are choices, at the end of the day, we as people also need to be clear on, do we want so much and more from the government? My own view is that we should ask less from the government so that they tax us less and we can produce more and consume more independent of the government. But that's not the way our political economy is. So I think there are conflicting demands on the government also, and therefore they have to some way or the other decide on how to finance these demands, or what reforms to do, because there's so much pressure otherwise. All of us say Modi government doesn't do enough reforms. When they do it, we say, oh, these are the wrong reforms, or they're doing it too quickly. So I mean, there's no, I don't think there's any perfect formula, and I think I still give them credit for taking some hard decisions. I mean, obviously, the best time to reform would be when the times are good. But in India, we only reform when the times are bad. That's also a fact of our political economy. I agree with Venu. Ideally, you should do reforms when everything is, the people are feeling well off, people are feeling comfortable. But in India, that time, we don't want reform. We want the status quo. Only when things go down, whether domestically or externally, that's when we do reforms. That's what's happening. I think that's the reality of India, and the government has to get some credit there. And of course, we can keep saying, we can argue over which reforms should come first and which reforms should come later. But the fact is, reforms are needed one way or the other. And it's not only a matter of corporates and investors. I think even for this unemployment, better jobs, they're not going to come from the government, right? We've gone past that era where government jobs can be given to a majority of the people. It has to come from the private sector. So ultimately, you need that investment. You need corporates to grow. Otherwise, how are you going to achieve your goals?
I'm going to take a break and come back and talk a little bit more with Venu on the high petrol prices. I'm still not sure whether this, if there is some answer to that. But after a break. Hello and welcome back to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. We're here discussing, the economy and reforms. The rising petrol prices, Venu, yes, Dheeraj has a point. We expect a lot from the government, and where is the government going to get the money from? But, isn't there some other way? Why is taxation the only answer to raise money? Isn't that show something fundamentally wrong?
Yeah, Priya, I kind of, I take Dheeraj's point that when revenues have collapsed, the over-dependence on petrol, diesel, taxing of petrol, diesel, both by the states and center, at one level can be justified. But from a macroeconomic perspective, Priya, you cannot tax a single product beyond a point. Beyond a point, if you tax it, it will start impacting growth. Now, this is for both center and states. There has to be some understanding to limit the taxation on petrol. At the moment, I don't know, 40% of the price component, or 40-50% must be, maybe over 50% is the tax component. Now, can you imagine
it's actually
an item
100.
of...
It's actually 100. Huh? It's actually 100%. The tax component is 100%. I mean, it's the price and the taxes are equal, roughly. Yeah, probably taxes more than...
No, I'm saying that therefore the tax component is 50% of the total price, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, 50% of the total price. Now, we have to see at what point... Now, we are the most expensive diesel petrol across emerging markets. Now, this is a recovery period. Now, during a recovery period, how far is it advisable to have such a high rate of tax on a product which is not a luxury product? When you tax petrol, diesel, you are actually taxing the middle class and poor as well. This is not a rich man's consumption, item. Because I heard some farmers also being interviewed at the Delhi border saying that they used to pay 45 rupees 4 or 5 years ago. Now they're paying whatever, 90 rupees or whatever, 85 rupees for diesel. Now it is affecting the farmers. It is affecting, we have a huge economy around service providing, Uber or drivers whose incomes get hit by, diesel, petrol, because that cost is on their books, right? They only get a percentage of what they earn from Uber or Ola or whatever. So I'm not sure whether the government, both center or states, they're thinking at all whether at what point, up to what point should they raise taxes beyond which it will start hitting the economy. Economy which is already somewhat battered because of COVID. So I think it's a very, very serious issue, and this is, I think this cuts across parties, because state governments are run by various opposition parties. They've also raise petrol prices because they want to fund their programs. So I think the center and states need to take a collective call on how much should they raise via petrol to fund various programs. And if beyond a point, I think they should agree on borrowing from the market rather than raising taxes from petrol. That's what my view is.
Yeah, this is also the reason the way to solve your problem is to include petrol and GST. But this is the reason that neither center nor states want it in GST, because they can then tax it to any amount they want. So actually the solution to this is that petroleum and everything else should come under GST.
Absolutely. I think that is the nub of the issue, because that's why we've had this profligate attitude towards petroleum products.
So I would say...
let me get Aditi and also let me quickly get Aditi in before frame freezes. Aditi, your take on the petrol prices?
Look, I mean, sure, petrol prices have gone up, they've come down, they've gone up again, etc. So all I'm saying is that the kind of rage that used to accompany every increase in petrol prices, say 10 years or 15 years ago, that kind of rage I don't detect now. I may be wrong, but politically, I am not seeing the government being punished for high petrol prices. So frankly, the government can do anything it wants. It can increase prices, it can subsidize petrol, it can go back to the old system. But I don't think that commanding position that petrol prices took at one point in our political history, that we are there at that point anymore. People do have factored it in, and it's not such a big deal.
Dilip, but this government is not punished for any decision. That is true, because they get away with anything, whether demonetization or high petrol or farm bill, which may or may not be good. But what should they be doing? That's something that we need to discuss. What is good? Because electorally, they seem to be getting away with everything.
I think the other day someone said that because you've got the electoral mandate doesn't give you the right to be wrong about other decisions. So I think that the fact that they are doing phenomenally electorally does not, I think, detract from what we could be doing as an economy and what would have worked to reduce the burden of COVID and induce the growth post-COVID. That's what we need to debate. I think that there's no question that if better reforms were to happen, I would think that you would need a wider discussion and more inputs being visibly discussed and debated. For me, and I'm surprised that the markets are not responding to this. The fact that economic decision making in this country seems to have run aground is something that is visible to most people who are looking at it. But that does not seem to get any punishment from the players in the market. And therefore, we have to conclude that if the players in the market know what's good for them, then this lack of economic initiative, discussion, debate, all of that does not matter.
I'm going to end with asking you about your former colleague from the Niti Aayog. Too much democracy, is that getting in the way?
You're muted. You're muted, Dheeraj.
I don't. I was actually present at the webinar when he made those remarks. I think the larger context in India is that there are obviously a lot of interests, vested interests. There may be other interests. There may be genuine interests, and they are competing interests. So, for example, on the farm bill, farmers of Punjab may have a view, Haryana may have a view, some other farmers may have a different view. So, I think in India, on every policy issue, labor, there'll be a view of organized labor, there'll be a view of unorganized labor. So there are always these conflicts which needs to be managed. And I think that is really, too much democracy in the sense that, China doesn't have to manage any of these conflicts. They can, just ram through whatever they want and it doesn't matter. But in India, you say it's a very popular government and, they've won mandates and nothing seems to affect them. Yet, I think they still have to be careful about what they go ahead with, because at the end of the day, you don't know, whether this farmers thing, where it'll end, or if you take up some other difficult reform, where it'll end. So, electoral invincibility is for now, but it may not be there tomorrow, depending on what you do. So I think democracy is complex, and in that sense, managing of interests is important. And I think, I'm not one who believes there's too much democracy. I think, democracy is good. That's the only way we stay together and, have the level of growth we have. Otherwise, I think we would be probably a negative growth economy all the time if we didn't have democracy, because, one section or the other would completely prevail. So I think we need this balance of interest. But again, whether they have managed it properly or not is a call which all of us can take. But I think there's no option but to go with reform. And of course, it would be much better if people accept them widely. Because naturally, if some sections are unhappy and obstruct them, then you will get a half-baked reform. If the farm bills are at the end of the day diluted, you're neither in the old system nor in the new system, you're in the middle. I think that's what happened with GST also. There was so much compromise that you ended up with a system which was neither efficient nor perfect, and it had a lot of problems. So you moved to a new reform, but you didn't get the benefit from it. So I think in that sense, negotiating with interest is fine, but you shouldn't come to third, fourth, best solutions. That's my only point on this. But I wouldn't subscribe to any too much democracy. I think that's what keeps us in good shape.
Okay.
No,
We're going to end now, totally out of time. Venu, quickly.
I finally, there's one famous line of Thomas Piketty, the economist. He said that if economic rationality and democratic rationality, they come into conflict completely, then things don't work. So they have to be reconciled. Economic rationality, democratic rationality is as important as economic rationality.
I think in the end, communication is something I think we all agree on, whether, the reforms are good or bad, but at least the communication should have been there better. What the government is doing now, perhaps with the farmers, should have been done earlier before they pushed it through. On any other issue, I mean, any reform, any decision, I think for someone who's so great at communicating, I don't know what's happening on the economic front, why the government is not communicating more. At least that is my take. But that's it. Thank you for watching this. Thank you for taking part in this discussion, and also all of you for watching this show. Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.